Hello, and welcome to today's call with Congresswoman April McClain Delaney. During today's call, we'll be taking questions from constituents like you. To ask a question, please press star 3 now. You may also sign up for her newsletter by pressing star 6 at any time during the call. Again, please press star 3 now to ask a question or star 6 to subscribe to her newsletter. With that, I'll now turn it over to Congresswoman April McClain Delaney.
So thank you. Good afternoon, and thanks to all my six district constituents for joining this teletown hall. And I believe that a couple thousand of you RSVP'd, and I really appreciate you for showing up. I know it's been a head-spinning 5 months since I swore into Congress, and I just wanted to update you on some of the work that's being undertaken by my congressional office, both on Capitol Hill and in the district. And then I'd like to introduce some special guests who are also here with me, each with a specific expertise, and take your questions. I really want to hear from you. But I want to reiterate that my office is always available for assistance, and we've had over 75,000 constituents contact us at our offices since I first swore in on January 3rd. I wanted to start tonight by saying that my priority is here to be here for you all. And I have traveled repeatedly throughout the 6th District during the past few months. I've met with all 5 of our farm bureaus. I've reached out to our mayors. I've met our businesses and factories, talked to many nonprofits, Boys and Girls Clubs, Rotaries, and attended a few cultural events. This past week, we selected our winning student artist in the 2025 Congressional Art Competition, and congratulations to Nolan Chang for her stunning piece, Con Artist, which is going to be hung in the Capitol Tunnel soon with many other pieces from across the country. And we also announced our request of federal funding for 15 community project funding grants across the district, totaling almost $41 million. And that includes projects like water infrastructure upgrades, a planetarium for Frostburg State, new fire trucks and ambulances in different counties, and funding of various youth centers and affordable housing for seniors. I believe that critical investments like this are what can make the lives of our residents in Maryland 6 better and more affordable. On that point, I visited Brunswick city leaders yesterday and heard about their visionary leadership for a new streetscape and the need for a new water facility in their reservoir. But I just want to focus on a few highlights which are weighing on my heart before I take questions. A few weeks ago, I visited Allegheny County with Governor Wes Moore to see the flood damage. I believe in showing up, and my heart really remains heavy with what I saw. I met with first responders and local leaders who really were heroes and acting without hesitation as no lives were lost. But I saw a lot of overturned cars, badly damaged fire station, a library filled with mud, and the Westernport School where hundreds of children had to be evacuated by boat. And while the damage was severe, what really stood out was the hope and determination of the neighbors coming together. And I literally touched my heart to hearing about how they came shovels in hand to dig out their neighbors. I think I'm going to start on that, is that resilience and that hope is who we are as Americans at our best. And it reminds me why I do this work, and it strengthens my commitment to fight for these communities. I was upset today when I heard that the acting director of FEMA said that he thought it was a joke that he didn't know about the hurricane season, because I do think that FEMA and our agencies really have such a crucial role in underpinning the safety, security, and rebuilding of our counties, and it's something that I want to work on in the weeks and days to come. So what happened in Mount Maryland also reminds us why it's so important to have well-trained firefighters and emergency responders ready to protect us when disaster strikes. And that's why I fought to have the National Fire Academy reopened after it closed abruptly by the administration in March. I wrote a lot of letters to the administration and spoke at congressional hearings and took to the floor to urge its reopening. The Academy trains tens of thousands of first responders every year, and their safety and our homes and businesses depend on it. It will be reopening, and it highlights a larger issue that we all want government to run efficiently, but it cannot come at the expense of public health or community. That balance is essential, and I will continue to work with my colleagues, Democrats and Republicans alike, to ensure that our critical services are protected. And now it's June. I want to take a moment to highlight the service of our service members and their families and recognize what still needs to be done to deliver the support they earned. Last month, I was proud to lead the bipartisan legislation that expands paid family leave for military givers, the MIL-FMLA Act. In Maryland alone, more than 150,000 military and veteran caregivers are in need of support. And according to the AARP, these caregivers spend 1.5 times more out of pocket than other family caregivers. This bill ensures all of these caregivers, including domestic partners and extended family, can access paid family leave. It's a step towards honoring their service and sacrifice. And next, I want to be honest about something very concerning happening in Washington that will directly impact families here at home. It's something that we're dealing with this week called the reconciliation package. The legislation that went through the House last week is now currently before the Senate. The House majority recently passed a government funding package that will cut $300 billion from SNAP, the program that helps 1 in 9 families in our district put food on the table. It slashes $800 billion from Medicaid, which nearly 1 in 7 people in our area rely on, including 1 in 3 children. This package also tightens restrictions on free and reduced lunch, particularly as we go into summer, threatening to support nearly 95,000 students in our district depend on each day. And these devastating cuts were made to expand the tax cuts, which will benefit the wealthiest 1%. I am concerned that middle-class families might see a bit more in their paychecks. Those gains are quickly swallowed up by rising costs, more for food, more for health insurance, and so much more. So I am serving on the Agricultural Committee, and so it has been very important for me to work on these cuts to SNAP and Medicaid. And these proposed cuts to these programs surpass every other item under the jurisdiction of the committees combined. These are not just numbers or policy points. These cuts will force our neighbors and friends to make impossible choices, to maybe skip meals or to go without medicine. And yet the same package will increase the federal deficit by nearly $4 trillion, making it harder to invest in national security and other critical priorities. The last point I would put on this is that I've traveled across the district visiting food banks like MANA, which relies on food assistance programs to feed 61,000 Marylanders a year, or Family Care in Hagerstown, where 62% of its patients use Medicaid to access affordable care in the county, which is a designated health professional shortage area, along with Allegheny and Garrett counties. Taking from working families to give more for tax funds is not something that I love, and every dollar cut from SNAP hurts local businesses and farms. And in fact, the surprising thing is every $1 spent on SNAP returns $1.50 to our economy. I do want you to know that I'm fighting every day to protect these programs and the families who rely on them, and I voted against this funding package because I believe Marylanders need those funds. But the last point I'm going to say, protecting our communities goes beyond funding. It also means defending the principles that keep our democracy strong, our Constitution, the rule of law, and the checks and balances that hold power accountable. I was relieved and encouraged to see the courts recently rule against certain executive orders aimed at intimidating law firms, an important victory for fairness and justice. As an attorney myself, I, along with a congressional delegation, led a letter to law firms affected by these orders, who later formed agreements with the administration. Agreements, I believe, compromise our system's checks and balances and threaten Americans' ability to have their day in court. To me, no one is above the law, and we must all be held accountable. It's a reminder that we are standing up for our rights and our principles in everything we do. Thank you for being here today, for speaking out, and for sharing your stories. I look forward to hearing your questions and thoughts. I have so much more to say, but together I really want to know that I'm there for you, I'm fighting for you, and I want to build a future where every family, every farmer, every worker, every student and child is respected and supported. Now, I want to give as much time as possible to answer your questions, but I just want to introduce our panelists for this evening so you know who else can help answer your questions tonight. First, I want to introduce Daniel Horowitz. He's the Acting Legislative Director at AFG, or the American Federation of Government Employees, which proudly represents 820,000 federal and D.C. government workers across the United States and the world. I must also say I represent 35,000 government workers within the 6th District, including NIST, Fort Detrick, our fire academy, parts of NIH and our National Institute on Cancer. I'm also going to introduce Alex Lawson, the Executive Director at Social Security Works, the convening member of the Strengthened Social Security Coalition, a coalition made up of 340 national and state organizations. I was able and fortunate about 4 weeks ago to also host a forum on Social Security in Gaithersburg at Borough Park with Congressman Larson, and we'll also be happy to share some of that information. Last, I would like to introduce Mary Beth Melcarney with Families USA, a nonprofit that is esteemed for consumer health advocacy and improving access to care. So thank you for giving us your time. Daniel, Alex, and Mary Beth, would you like to say a few words before we get started?
Thanks, Congresswoman. It's Daniel Horowitz. And thanks for the introduction. And as the Congresswoman said, the House has run through the Republican process of reconciliation just a week or two ago, and it's now moved on to the Senate. But this bill, unfortunately, contains a lot of significant changes that affect federal employees who are 8% of the workforce in Maryland District 6. We're very concerned about them, and we're now working the process in the Senate to try to mitigate some of the damage from this bill. But it's very much still a live issue, and I'm happy to go into more detail in the Q&A. And again, thanks to the Congresswoman. It's great to have such a strong ally for federal workers there in Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Alex, you want to say a few words?
Yes, thank you so much, Congresswoman. My name is Alex Lawson. I'm the Executive Director of Social Security Works. And, you know, we work every day to defend people who've paid into these systems and earned our benefits, which includes Medicaid, the largest provider of long-term care in this country. 1 in 2 nursing home residents is paid for by Medicaid. And let me be clear as to what the Republican big, beautiful betrayal does. It destroys Medicaid. Over $700 billion in cuts, ripping health care away from 14 million people across Medicaid and the ACA. I mean, this is very, very bad stuff all across the country, but especially in rural areas where you will have hospital after hospital close, where mental health services, especially to young people, will be gone. And that's what's moving through the Senate right now. But there is an opportunity to stop it. We have to remember that the first Trump administration, they put forward basically the same thing. It also passed the House. Then they went and had a beer bash at the White House, and then the bill was defeated in the Senate. So right now, we need to raise our voices as loudly as possible.
Thank you, Alex. I agree. I worked very hard for almost 2 days around the clock as we were going through the reconciliation bill, and I'm concerned about these cuts. Loved it, and I'm sure you'll be amazing at answering a lot of the questions on that. I'm so glad you joined us. Mary Beth, I'll let you follow on about consumer health and obviously how some of the risks and cuts will impact as well, and just a brief introduction.
Sure. Thank you so much, Congresswoman, for putting your attention and time towards this, because it's so important to be thinking about what the House has proposed and what is moving forward and being considered. As we've just heard, Medicaid is really under attack, as is the ability for Marylanders and others across the country to purchase their own health insurance through what's called the state marketplaces. In Maryland, it's the Maryland Health Connection. The proposals are just making it more difficult for people to enroll in Medicaid or enroll in private health coverage, and making it more difficult for those that already are enrolled to stay on that coverage. Some new figures came out just yesterday looking at how many people could lose Medicaid. Just in Maryland, 175,000 people could lose their Medicaid coverage as a result of these proposals. That's 12% of everyone on Medicaid in Maryland. and there's additional proposals in here to just reduce Medicaid funding overall. And, states really depend on Medicaid funding to fund not only Medicaid costs in their states, but to really serve as the backbone of the healthcare system to keep hospitals open and operating. And, figures just released yesterday, we're estimating that Maryland could lose over $22 billion in lost Medicaid funding as a result of these policies. So it's cuts to the individual who need that care and cuts to the system as a whole. So we're very, very concerned and really happy to answer questions today.
So with that, I'm going to turn to the panel, but I'm just going to say to put a punctuation point for all those online. My biggest concern is that a tsunami of these cuts that are intersecting with each other, which include, cuts to SNAP, cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, some of our RIFs, and all of them together layering upon each other, which to me I say is a tsunami about to hit Western Maryland and rural America, which is why it's so important for us and for different stakeholders to get ahead of this and to figure out how we can best cross-leverage, across different stakeholders to get in front of that. The one thing I will say under the Trump administration, we have seen attacks on also NIH, the National Institute of Health, which has been in the crosshairs. And these cuts will also impact essential research and life-saving care and forced job cuts. So I'm going to now turn to the panel, and can I hear the first questions? And I'm sorry for the long intro, but I thought it was really important to set the stage.
Thank you, Congresswoman. We'll go ahead and jump right into the Q&A. Our first caller is Karen, who joins us from Montgomery Village. Karen, you're live with the Congresswoman. Please go ahead with your question.
Hi, I was just wondering what you're going to do about the NIH situation with us facing a 40% cut in our budget. And
oh my gosh, it's so funny. I just brought that up too. It's so funny because this is really incredible. It's so funny you said that because NIH, HHS at Fort Detrick, and the Institute of Cancer, obviously, it's these cuts in the budget are awful, and they will really impact research, which is really underpins a lot of innovation, a lot of our pharma and our businesses. This is what I've been doing. I have been actually on my science. I am on the Science, Space, and Research Committee within Congress, and I have really been talking to my Republican colleagues about the need for us to invest at NIH, how it is driving life-saving care, lots of innovation, and I believe that it is starting to break through in terms of the message that we need to continue to invest. But in the short term, the courts, as you know, have been kind of the backstop to a lot of these agencies in terms of how these risks have happened and the way in which they've happened. But unfortunately, I have to say, with this 40% reduction in some of the researchers, we are losing some of our researchers, obviously out of the government and even out of the country. So it is a big issue in terms of competitiveness, and one which I am lifting up on, and I would really would love all of you within that health community to also lift up to our colleagues across the aisle that we really need to reinvest because it is so important, and not only just NIH, but NIST, which is also in the district, and NOAA, and many of our other incredible research institutions. Would any of our panelists also like to add anything to this?
It's Daniel Horowitz. I was just going to mention that we have had some success in litigation, as the Congresswoman said, and recently we got a preliminary injunction that has been blocking those RIFs across many government agencies. So we're just going to keep our fingers crossed as that moves through the appeals process and ultimately to the Supreme Court, where we don't know, of course, how that will be treated. But ultimately, it's going to depend on Congress and the budget next year as to how these terrible proposed cuts are being handled.
And I would add it's important to uplift this and uplift the impact on health generally and on the impact on also our businesses and, how it drives, not only workers in their jobs, but also the foundation of research, which underpins a lot of the businesses in the Sixth. But please reach out to my office, and I'm happy to keep the dialogue going because it is something we are very focused on. What is our next question, please?
Sure, Congresswoman. Our next question comes from Sharon. Sharon, you're live on the call. Please go ahead with your question.
Yes, my question is, I retired from the government on March the 14th, and I was expecting to get my annuity payments, and my agency is still processing my retirement claim. They won't give me a response as when I ask to what's going on with the claim. They're completely ignoring me. I have to come out of my pocket for living expenses, also to pay for all of my federal employee benefits like my insurance, my dental care, my vision care. They have been completely unresponsive. Everyone that's retired around the same time that I did, they all have received their annuity payments. When I ask them about mine, they give me the runaround, and I want to know if anybody else is experiencing the same issue.
Well, first I would say, this is Congresswoman Delaney, I would say, have you reached out to our office? And we have, many experienced caseworkers who definitely work on these issues and help you in terms of facilitating that. As I said, we've had over 70,000 people reach out to us. So I would love, to have you do that in terms of that. But I'm also going to hand it over to Daniel Horowitz because I think he has probably dealt with a lot of these issues and has much expertise in being able to comment.
Which agency do you work for, ma'am? We may not have our caller any longer, but unfortunately, I think this is part of what is going on here is just the gutting of these agencies like the Office of Personnel Management that are responsible for processing these retirement claims. And so, unfortunately, I think situations like this are going to be all too common. And the sad fact is that OPM was struggling with that workload of processing annuities even before Trump got into office, and now with proposals to get rid of much of the workforce, it's just going to be impossible. And I'm afraid the caller situation is going to be the norm, where people cannot get the basic benefits that they have earned over many decades of work.
So thank you. And please, if our caller is not still on the line, make sure to reach out to our office, or else we will look up your name or try and reach out to you because it's very important. And it's a difficult situation for all of you. Next question.
Great. We have an online question submitted from Mary, who asked, an acquaintance told her, that they had received an email from Social Security that in order to have access to their account data, they had to agree to not hold Doge accountable for any misuse of their personal data. Is this legal?
This is something that deeply goes to issues that I've been working on my whole life. I worked at a nonprofit on issues with kids and media, and the issue of privacy and the ability to control our information and who has it and what that can be done with it is something fundamental. Unfortunately, our country, our Congress, unlike the EU and other parts of the world, has not stepped up to the plate to adequately regulate and give privacy protections in the way in which we should. However, I do believe that this is lawless, and it is something actually that I want to propose a bill on to specifically talk about how Doge is infringing on data privacy. And I think it's a very dangerous place to be. And I believe it is lawless because if a individual is giving their information to the government, whether it be the IRS, whether it be Social Security, whether it be with respect to your health, HIPAA regulations protect our health information. Our tax information, we don't expect that it's going to be disclosed if we give it to the IRS. So I would say no, absolutely not. And I believe that that would be upheld in a court of law because that is coercion of the worst sort. But what I do believe is that we must strongly enforce privacy by passing a comprehensive privacy legislation, but specifically targeting entities like DOGE that take government information and transfer it to third parties. It's not right. Next question.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Before we move to the next question, I'd like to take this opportunity to remind everybody that if you'd like to ask a question live, you could press *3 at any time to join the queue. And if you would like to join the Congresswoman's e-newsletter, you could press *6 to do that. Our next question was submitted via Facebook by George, who asks, is it true that Medicaid now has work requirements?
Yes. Well, first of all, George, very good question. There's always been some work requirements with SNAP, and yes, but this new and some work requirements, yes, but this new bill will not only cut $715 billion from Medicaid over the next 10 years, but imposes strict work requirements. People not working 80 hours a month could lose coverage starting in 2026. And it can also jeopardize the Medicaid expansion. But if any of our panel would like to jump in and speak a little bit more to this, I would love that. And I must say, in our district, almost 194,000 people rely on Medicaid.
Congresswoman, this is Alex Lawson with Social Security Works. Just adding to your remarks, I think the question, what people need to understand is that this has nothing to do with work or getting people to work or anything like that. It's just stealing people's health care to give tax handouts to the richest people in this country. One of the ways, and it's the most insidious ways that the Republicans do this, is by wrapping everything in impenetrable red tape. It's not about work. It's about red tape and bureaucracy to make it impossible for people to get the benefits that they've earned. And that's the goal. So that is a really deeply cynical and evil part of this policy. Is it's just massive increases in red tape on healthcare that people rely on. So it's not about work. It's not about requiring anything. It's about wrapping it in red tape and making it impossible for people to get the benefits that they've earned.
Yeah, this is Mary Beth. I would just add to what Alex is saying that, the research would show that, in most states, 95% of people are working, would meet the requirements or would meet one of the exemptions. And there are a number of exemptions built into this proposed law. But the problem is just the paperwork to show that you're working or the paperwork to show that you meet one of the exemptions if you have a disability, if you're a caregiver, things like that. It just is a really massive hurdle for anyone to meet. Let alone people that may be working multiple jobs, have a lot of commitments in their daily lives, and so it's really more about adding the red tape than leading to actual work. And we know that these programs have been tried in some states, not in Maryland, but in other states, and they haven't led to any improvements in work. They haven't led to improvements in pay, or ability to obtain private insurance. And those sort of stated goals of these types of programs haven't panned out, and there's no reason to think that the iteration of the work requirements that is proposed here would have any different result than what we've already seen in numerous states that have tried these.
So for my panelists, I'm going to ask you, Mary Beth, if one of my constituents, was having a hard time proving work requirements, I, of course, would and was, working or has met it or was trying to deal with it. In addition to contacting our office, are there other resources to help or other places they can go to make sure that they are best able to get either a waiver or to prove that they are in fact eligible?
I want to hope that there will be those resources. I think part of what's worrying us a lot is that at the moment the proposal to put in place work requirements has been pushed up into 2026, so it's coming very quickly, and those resources may not be there in states yet. We've seen in states that have tried to put in place work requirements for Medicaid. It takes a while to get the IT systems, the enrollment systems, all the systems in place for people to, even if you wanted to, you had the paperwork and all the information to prove your eligibility, just getting through the IT systems, the clunky, glitchy enrollment systems that take a while to come into place. And it will depend on each state to do a really good job putting in place that enrollment system. So, I would hope that Maryland would try its best to put something in place, but it will be up to each state to do that. And states don't have, Congress isn't proposing to give states a lot of time. And then, the wraparound resources in communities that may be required to assist people that are having trouble, those will take some time for people to kind of learn and understand how to navigate the system. So it may be a while until that kind of resource is up and running, is really distressing.
Thank you, sadly, for answering that question. It's not all doom and gloom, folks, but definitely concerns, and that's why I wanted to raise this up and really hone in on some of these issues for a lot of you. Our next question, please.
Sure. We'll move back to a live caller. We have Ann joining us from Frederick. Ann, you're live with the Congresswoman and the panel. Please go ahead with your question.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can,
Loud and
Ann.
clear.
How are you doing?
Oh, okay. All right. Well, thank you, Congresswoman, for organizing this call. I really appreciate you doing that and the panelists participating. With this spending bill, there are just horrible spending cuts. But my understanding is there is just a horrific provision that restricts the authority of federal courts to hold government officials in contempt when they violate court orders. And how I interpret that means that they can violate the Constitution with impunity. So my question is, what is being done to address this and get that out of the bill?
Bing, bing, bing. And that is exactly right. I actually raised up this issue personally within a chat with several of my Democratic and Republican colleagues. And you are exactly right. There is a host of toxic extra bonus provisions that have nothing to do with reconciliation and budgeting, even some with AI and tanning beds. But this specific provision you're talking about is exactly right. They put in that there was that if judges held an elected official, which could include, the Trump administration, in contempt for not following a court order, i.e., something like the Garcia case, or many different immigration, but all sorts of different cases, that there was no ability to really seek enforcement by the judges. I think this is clearly unconstitutional and illegal. Obviously, it is implicit that if judges have a ruling that they should be able to enforce it. I think that it will be, that in itself, if it passed, would be taken to court and would be deemed null and void. And so it is something absolutely absurd. But I am working with other colleagues and will be raising this issue up both on the House side, but I'm actually reaching out to my Senate colleagues. I think it might go through something called the BIRD process, where it is not directly linked to the budget and might be kicked out even before it reaches it. But you are right. It is in that reconciliation bill, and it is something that needs to be stricken. Thank you for raising that. Next question.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Our next call comes from Julie, who calls us from Cumberland. Julie, you're live on the call. Please go ahead with your question.
Thank you, and I want to just say again, thank you for providing this call and for your time tonight. I do appreciate that. And I'm kind of following up with the previous caller in that I also had seen a possible bill about no state or political subdivision may enforce any law or regulation regulating artificial intelligence models, et cetera.
Yep.
A 10-year period starting the date of the act. What is...
Yep. It's absurd. This is absolutely absurd. And for those of you who know my background, I worked in nonprofit, with respect to social media and its impact on all of us, but particularly kids. And, my whole early career was dedicated to privacy protections. But AI is something I worked on in the Biden administration, and it is very important that we both promote the innovation and what it can do for us in so many ways in terms of research and breakthroughs, but there does need to be bumpers and safeguards on AI. And unfortunately, big tech is really lobbying for unrestricted freedom, and this somehow slipped into the bill, and it would stop any of our states from enacting new laws or regulations on AI models or AI systems. And if you think about it, it would, really stop state laws which would protect consumers. And it would bypass a lot of privacy safeguards and actually deceptive practices targeting consumers. I do believe that this is something inserted by big tech, but we really need to have a full hearing, and we need to have separate legislation. The EU is looking at AI legislation. There are other models to look at it, but it should not be slipped into a reconciliation bill. We are also heavily pushing to have this under the BIRD process. They call it BIRD bath, but that this has no part in a financial bill. They're trying to slip things in, and that this really needs to be a separate standalone bill where we really comprehensively look at bumpers and safeguards for AI. Some of our states are going ahead and putting, like California, some protections in place, but we do want to make sure that it's not there's not a checkerboard of regulations, but this is not the place to put that kind of legislation, and so we are strongly pushing back. Thank you for raising that. To me, this is a big issue. Do any of the other panelists want to say anything on this issue? Okay, next question.
Sure. We'll take a question submitted via Facebook. Rita asks, is Social Security going to be negatively impacted by the actions down in D.C.?
Well, Social Security was not the target of the reconciliation package, but the administration has its eye, it seems, on privatizing Social Security and doing some of these cuts. But I am going to turn this over to our panel of experts and probably let them weigh in. Maybe Alex?
Yeah, go ahead, Alex. I don't know if we have Alex, but it's Daniel with AFG. And as the Congresswoman said, Social Security is fortunately out of bounds for reconciliation, but it's not immune to the administration attacks. And one of the ways that they're going about that is by putting so much pressure on the head count at the Social Security Administration that it will be increasingly unable to do its work. So it's vital that as the budget process continues to unfold over the course of the year, that we make sure that Social Security continues to have the staffing and the field offices they need. It's really the best deal around. It has the lowest overhead percentage of any program really public or private. It's very efficient. It's been unfairly maligned by Musk and the Doge for non-existent claims of fraud, and that, as the Congresswoman says, being used as an issue to perhaps privatize it in the future, and that needs to be opposed.
And I am here.
Oh, good.
Sorry,
and,
I was speaking into the mute, so apologies for that.
Please go ahead.
But I was going to say, Daniel, why don't you talk about the attacks on the workforce, and I'll follow up to that. So it worked out well. What Daniel talked about, I think, absolutely on target, but it's just the magnitude is hard for people to imagine of how destructive these cuts are. We're already seeing service disruptions in Social Security, especially in the disability insurance portion. The problem is that Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, knows nothing about Social Security. And so his Doge goons came through the administration with a chainsaw. They're firing people, pushing people out, closing offices, and promising that they're going to replace everything with AI. Problem is, sir, AI doesn't work. That's fake. They've pushed it onto the phones. There's a Washington Post story about it. They called up. They asked it simple questions. It didn't get a single question correct. So this is just about a destruction of Social Security. And it is because they want to wreck it so that they can rob it. That's what's going on, and we have to fight back. Through the budget reconciliation fight, although it's not directly on Social Security, we just can't let up in our fight against Social Security. So it really is a hands-off Social Security, hands-off Medicaid, hands-off our healthcare moment.
And I might add, Social Security is not an entitlement. I mean, it is something that people have paid into their entire life. Oh, go ahead. I heard one more comment.
This is Mary Beth. I just wanted to add, just to note the connection between Social Security and Medicaid. If there's a backlog in regional offices for applicants for disability, a lot of those folks are able to apply for Medicaid in the meantime, or even if you do receive Social Security benefits, you depending on your status, you may depend on Medicaid while you're awaiting Medicare benefits, the way things work out. So, having a substantial Medicaid benefit in every state is really important. Social Security doesn't sit by itself outside of the healthcare system and outside of Medicaid in particular. It's really, really important as many people are on Medicaid while they await Social Security benefits.
That's an excellent point, Mary Beth. And the only last thing I'm going to say is you have to always remember that Social Security is an earned benefit. It is not an entitlement. You are citizens who have paid into it their whole life have earned it. And that is why it is, it must be preserved, and it's the world's best social safety net. And I'm going to fight like you cannot believe to preserve the benefits and the high-quality service. So next, and by the way, this is something that is wildly unpopular, the cuts to this, and I think that Republicans are really starting to feel the pinch on this one. Next question.
Sure. We'll take a live caller again. Next, we'll go to Jake, who calls us from Frederick. Jake, you're live on the call with the Congresswoman and the panel. Please go ahead with your question.
Hey,
Jake,
Jake,
you're live on the...
Are you there?
Jake, you're live with the Congresswoman. Please go ahead with your question. All right. We'll see if we can get back with Jake here momentarily. In the meantime, we'll go ahead and take a call from Elaine, who joins us from Frederick. Elaine, you're live with the Congresswoman and the panel. Please go ahead with your question.
Yes. Good afternoon, Representative Delaney. Thank you for taking our calls and being here. Just wanted to say I was in Cumberland a week and a half ago and at the Del Fest, and all the tips were going toward the relief fund, so the food trucks and everywhere, so that was pretty nice.
Yeah,
I'm
definitely.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, it just felt good to be up there too, because I go to Deep Creek Lake all the time, and Cumberland is a wonderful place to visit on the way. Any rate, I'm kind of curious a little bit about Emmitsburg, because I've heard some things, and I'm not sure if they're true. This is kind of a little bit of a more minor question, but are they getting rid of the fireman program in Emmitsburg?
Oh my gosh. The National Fire Academy. I actually spoke on the House
because I do
floor
not
about
politically
this.
align with that town, but I do like that program with climate change. And are they getting rid of? I can't.
Well, Elena, good question. Yes, I spoke on the House floor about this and read a letter of our colleagues about this. In March, the administration halted and canceled all classes at the National Fire Academy. And I have to tell you that, tens of thousands of firefighters and first responders from across the country travel to Emmitsburg to take these classes and be prepared. And in fact, I even spoke with the mayor of Emmitsburg about this about two weeks ago, and personally went in and sat down in his office. So I did lead a bipartisan letter to the administration with all the Maryland delegation and asking for their rationale and to reopen the classes immediately. And Senator Van Hollen even grilled the secretary of DHS, Nome. They did not respond to my letter, even though we repeatedly tried to get a hold of them. But courses were reopened a few weeks ago. But we don't have any guarantee that they will remain opened or remain funded. I am coincidentally making this a big priority because I'm a big proponent of our firefighters, our law enforcement, and our first responders, and I'm planning to introduce legislation soon, maybe even as soon as next week, to ensure this never happens again and to ensure that our classes do remain open and that we have more resources for our firefighters. But thank you. It did happen. But we have them open for now, and it's a very big part of along with St. Mary's, Mount St. Mary's, along the Fire Academy is a very big part of the economy for Emmitsburg as well. So we were happy to have it reopened. Thank you. Next question.
Sure. Our next question comes from Facebook. Lizzie asks, what is the current status of the repair efforts for the flooding in Mountain, Maryland? Will FEMA be stepping in, or is it still too soon to tell?
Well, I spoke to that in my opening comments. I was on a conference call with some of the elected leaders and Maryland's emergency management systems just earlier this week after I visited. They are still evaluating all of the damage up in Mountain, Maryland. The governor has declared it a state of emergency, and they are looking at the thresholds of how much damage there is. Once you reach the threshold of about $45 million, it kicks from the state over to the federal, and FEMA has been notified and is on the ground now evaluating the damage. We will see how much FEMA does, in fact, step in and start to hopefully, give assistance, resources, and funding. But as you know, there have been cuts to FEMA. And as I noted, if you read in the press today or yesterday, the acting director of FEMA, said he didn't even know that there was a hurricane season, and then said, oh, it was a joke. And I said, things like resources from FEMA are no joking matter, whether it be from fires, whether it be from tornadoes, or whether it be from floods. And we need professionalism, we need competence, and we need people on the ground who understand how these disaster and recovery agencies like FEMA, like the National Fire Academy, like NOAA and the Emergency Weather Service must be funded for our resilience and for our recovery. It is no joking matter. So what is the next step? I am pressing with our Maryland delegation. I am pressing with my Republican colleagues. I'm reaching out to Andy Harris, who is on our rep from the Eastern Shore, to make sure that we all work collectively as a delegation to ensure that both FEMA and state resources are put back there. But lifting it up and also I would say that there are a lot of nonprofits in the area that are working on this, and for those online, all help is needed at this point. And I've listed some of these resources on my Facebook page. Next question.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Our next question was submitted personally by Joe. He asks, why are laborers working on clean energy projects supposedly losing their jobs? Is this because of the bill that just passed?
Well, the bill passed the House, yes, but yes, the Republicans passed this bill that slashes clean energy and pollution reduction programs to fund these tax breaks that we discussed, and some of the EV credits have been eliminated, as well as eliminating energy investment tax credits and production tax credits for facilities not under construction within 60 days of enactment. This is really a sad day because, it's not just about green energy, but it's also about the fact that many farmers who have invested into, whether it be putting in solar panels or investing into their properties, many businesses that have relied on the government and made investments, now they're not getting repaid, or they're not having certain things that they were acting in reliance upon with our government. Plus, it also undercuts a lot of the investments made by both international and domestic companies to really, comply with some of these IRA provisions and really drive business investment and national resilience. This is something, and it also blocks credits for residential solar and wind leases. I am, working, of course, to uplift this to say that this does not make sense for our businesses. I'm asking for some of our farm bureaus to also lift up how our farmers are hurt, and I'm hopeful that on the Senate side that there will be some pushback as well. But it is not, I think it's penny foolish, pound foolish, and undercuts our national resistance and our economy. Do any of my other panelists want to weigh in on that one? Okay, next question.
Great. We will go back to Jake, who called earlier and we lost on the call. He asks, will you work with the GOP to restore and expand the child tax credit to families with lower incomes?
Yes, yes, and yes. I think the child tax credit is one of the best anti-poverty provisions that we've ever had. The reconciliation package made investments in the CTC, but the changes will leave some of our most vulnerable behind. I've supported the American Family Act, which is a right-sized investment in the child tax credit, and these are issues you all feel acutely. And even things like the cost of child care, affordable child care is so important. It's really skyrocketed, and we need to provide support for families. Affordability is really difficult at this time, and our families need every investment and every tax credit that they can get. Does Daniel or Alex or Mary Beth want to comment at all?
This is Alex from Social Security Works. I would just echo everything that you said. It's such an incredibly important policy that we saw the results of it, reducing childhood poverty by enormous percentages. And then inexplicably is the polite way to say it, let expire. So it is the most obvious and common sense thing that people could do is to restore this incredibly effective anti-poverty policy.
And ironically, while they took away the child tax care credit, they want to extend all of the tax breaks that they have had for the past 7 years. And so for me, it is very ironic that those who are most vulnerable and need it the most have been stripped of that one income tax credit that would make such a difference on those who work so hard and are most vulnerable. So I hate to say this, we're at 6:30, but I want you to know that our office, if you send us an email or write us, we'll follow up with all questions. But I just want to take a moment to recognize the incredible impact that each and every one of you and countless Americans across the country are having right now by speaking out on the issues most important. Speak out to your neighbors, speak out to those around you. Stand up, speak out. And I know at times it may seem hopeless, but all of our voices, but particularly your voice, matters. And I mean, it means like attending rallies, writing letters, standing up in communities, but you make a difference. And I just want to say it is an honor, it's a privilege, and it is something I take with my deepest, deepest heart, representing this Maryland 6. And I thank you for your continued commitment to standing up for what's right, but also in also standing with me. Please keep fighting. Know that you're making a real difference. And democracy is messy and it's a work in progress. But as you know, showing up, our participation is crucial. As I mentioned earlier, I was just told my office has not received over 70,000, but over 85,000 calls and message. But we're committed to answering everyone. If you have follow-up questions or need assistance from my office, please call us at 301-926-0300. It's 301-926-0300, or email us at our website at McClainDelaney.house.gov. I also just have to thank our panelists. They are really superlative in all ways. They every day fight for our workers, for our Social Security, for our health care. And so Mary Beth, Alex, and Daniel, thank you for being online. And I thank each and every one of you and look forward to seeing you all soon.
Thank you, Congresswoman, and thank you to the panel. And thank you to all of you for joining today's telephone town hall with Congresswoman April McClain Delaney. If you would like to stay up to date on the Congresswoman's work, please follow her on Facebook, X, Blue Sky, and Instagram at Rep. April Delaney. If you would like to subscribe to her e-newsletter, just stay on the line and leave your name and email address after the tone. Thanks again for joining us, and have a good evening.